Hello everybody, welcome to another video. In today's video we have a pretty interesting computer, one that I'm sure many of us would have dreamt of having back in the olden days, and of course I am talking about 2015. So long ago now, 11 years ago. The Witcher 3, I should be specific, were at the top of the industry, and even the computer that we're testing today shred them to pieces. But starting us off with our GOAT, it is the 980 Ti, and I said it was the GOAT, but the actual GOAT is the 1080 Ti. You can say all you want about the price to performance, how it did power wise, but it goes without saying that it's still very much usable in 2026. That's not what we'll talk about today, and maybe we will talk about it in another video, but today we have the 980 Ti. I idolised this one back in the day, and even a few years after release, being the broke kid that I was, I idolised it for many years. Even today, I'm like, still really good. But with 6GB of GDDR5 VRAM, it was overkill at the time, and in today's world, 6GB is just about serviceable, especially considering that 8GB is still the norm even today. I'm looking at you, RTX 5060! But next up we do have our processor, which is the i7-5930K for the X99 platform. I got this as a bundle with 32GB of DDR4, pretty generic stuff. But considering the RAM price these days, £55 was not bad at all. I have unfortunately sold the RAM since then, as, gotta do what you gotta do when you're broke. But with this beast of a processor being released in late 2014, it might have not been the absolute best as the 5960X was a thing. 2 extra cores, a few more threads would have come in handy. We also had the i7-6700 coming out in late 2015 alongside the X299 platform, which probably was a lot better, but considering I got an absolute bargain with this, I had to make a video. I have decided to pair all of this with 16GB of DDR4, another generic 2 8GB sticks of 2400MHz. This was from CEX, very cheap. And, it's the fastest I could get it without crashing. These old X99 platforms don't really handle high-speed RAM too well. It could have been the RAM, but it could have also been the Soyo X99 motherboard. Maybe this isn't quite 2015. This is very modern. These reused motherboards, they're repurposed X99 chipsets. It's pretty awful. The VRMs are not good. I tried getting a few overclocks, it was never very stable. But for £27, alongside a Xeon 2630 V4, it was a pretty good deal, all things considering. I got a pretty cheap little CPU tower from AliExpress. It's just £6, and it seems to be keeping everything cool. Next we're talking about our case and storage, which is the Miku Mi2A. It's a pretty snazzy little case, all things considered. It was $28.99, and looking at it right now it's going for £32 today, but even for the small premium, it's a pretty nice little case. And I had to go ahead and buy a few generic 120mm fans from AliExpress, as I didn't have any of its own. These aren't basic black fans, but they will add a little bit of airflow, which is going to be needed with this build, as everything's pretty power hungry. We got an EVGA 550W power supply. It is scraping it a little bit close with the 980 Ti and the i7, but in the real world they consume about 350 watts, which is well within margin. It's 80 plus, but we'll have to do. This was just £15 from a local cash converter. And last of all is storage. I have a 128GB NVMe from eBay. Costed me £10, and it's actually going to let us run Windows 10 quite well. You know, we can't run Windows 11, which is probably one of the biggest downsides to this build. We all hate Windows. I could probably try and install Linux on it, but if this video gets enough views, then we'll have a look about turning this into a Linux gaming PC. And for our main bulk storage, I got a 500GB SATA SSD from eBay, which was just £25, so pretty good actually. Just gonna have a little list of all our prices here. We have the 980 Ti, which was a Facebook find. You can actually see that in an earlier video of mine where I test out the Xeon W3680, the first i7 basically. But the 980 Ti basically goes anywhere from £60 to around £80. So I went ahead and called this one a £70. The 5930K, also from a bundle, frequently found for £20. So on the list there, going down as £20. The Miku case, which was £30, no fans, they cost £1.50 each from AliExpress, £33. £6 for the CPU cooler, that's £40 there. And then the RAM, I got these from CEX, 2400 MHz, £15 a pop, it was 30 quid for the two of these. And then the motherboard, 27, but I didn't use the CPU, so call that 25. Storage came up to £35, and that brings our total to £235. But I may have been a little bit naughty with the motherboard pricing, so we'll just go ahead and call that £240. And even with the deals I got, I'm confident this build could be replicated for £250, no problem. Even if you wanted to go for a GTX 1070, they go for about the same price. Maybe a better choice. Alternatively, you've got the RTX 20 series, maybe the 2060. They can be found for around £100 these days, and they're a considerable amount faster than the 980 Ti. And we're going to go ahead and get into the benchmarks. Starting us off with our first game, it is of course Counter-Strike 2, and here we have Dust 2 with a load of bots, and it did average about 120 frames per second. These bots can be a bit more intensive on the processor, so we went ahead and tested Vertigo as well. With all these players running around, it's a little bit more intensive than your average competitive, so you might see a few more frames if you somehow manage to have this exact same build. We averaged 118 frames per second at 1080p low settings. FSR was off, and on average it was a very playable experience, and I had no problem playing quite competitively. I got quite into it and, you know, got a few kills here and there. So yeah, definitely playable on this setup. Next is Witchfire. It's a little bit of a more niche game, but it's something that I've been getting into a lot these days, and it's really fun. I'm enjoying it. It's also quite an intensive game, and it does look like we're averaging about 100 frames per second. Average is starting to come down. The 1% lows did hitch that to about 60, but the average 130 apparently. Very, very playable. You know, if you've got a high refresh rate monitor, this is a perfect game for you to play, and I had a lot of fun. Next up is Valorant, of course, unfortunately, and it did average about 200 FPS, 186 from MSI Afterburner. 1% lows dropped to about 90, but overall it was very playable. Got a few nice skills here again. Yeah, so I had a good time playing this deathmatch on Valorant. I honestly couldn't be asked to play a full competitive, as I don't have the patience for this game, but I keep benchmarking it because it's very popular. Next we have GTA 5, a very popular game still. This is not the enhanced version, this is the legacy version of the game, and it averaged 97 frames per second as I go ahead and ride around on my moped. But yeah, it was very, very playable. This is at 1080p high settings, so very, very playable. Next up is still a very popular game, very intensive on computers, is Cyberpunk 2077. Average frame rate hovered in the high 60s, didn't really drop too much. We saw a few hitches down to the low 40s, but overall it was very playable. And this system was actually a perfect way to play it. 1080p, high settings. And last on our list we have The Witcher 3 at 1080p ultra settings, and I just decided to lock this to 60 frames per second, and it was incredibly playable, no issues whatsoever as I just kill a few of these little monsters, and it was incredibly playable, and this PC has really surprised me. And that concludes our video. I really hope you have enjoyed this video and have enjoyed watching me build this scuffed X99 platform all the way from 2015. It's been a real pleasure seeing how this guy performs in 2026, and as you've seen, it still performs really well, and if it went for Windows 11, I think this would still be a really viable way to get into the PC world, but unfortunately that's Microsoft for you, and maybe in a future video we'll get Linux on here. But other than that, I really hope you guys have enjoyed the video. Make sure to give me a like and a subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.